Hey, everybody. Thank you for joining me today on today's live stream. Kind of impromptu. I just kind of wanted to, yeah, I didn't really have a scheduled time for this. I just was like, yeah, why don't I just go ahead and do a live stream? Who cares, right? And those of you who are watching right now, I appreciate it. Feel free that if you have any questions along the way, drop them in the chat, and if it's a good one and I feel like chatting about it on the live stream, I certainly will. So thanks again to everybody who has joined me today. Don't forget, you should bookmark coffeewithsteve.info to make sure you get a hold of me, get a hold of this page. And also, you can find me at Facebook at Coffee with Steve B. So you can check that out on Facebook. Yeah, so today I thought we would talk a little bit about Agile because um, Agile is one of those things that companies say they do, right? Like almost every job application you're going to find nowadays says Agile or Scrum or some form of Agile. And it's almost like, yeah, but how do you know if they're really doing Agile? Like, how does any company actually even know if they are doing Agile, right? A lot of them just don't. They say they are because they might take a couple of things and do them, but um, I guess one of the real frustrating things is like a lot of them will just say we've implemented Scrum and then we're Agile. Yeah, some of you guys know I got my issues with Scrum and how that's portrayed as Agile. I think that there's I don't know. I'd like to say Scrum is like the Norton antivirus of antiviruses. It's better than nothing, but there's certainly better ways out there. That's kind of my general take on Scrum. And I just kind of did a quick little Google search of, what are some news articles that are out there? People have been posting like, hey, how do you know if your team is agile? And I came across one that was kind of interesting and talks about a couple of different scenarios of how to test whether or not you're actually agile, or kind of take you through some mental exercises to see if you're agile. So let me just quick cut over to that one. Are you really agile? Probably not. Here's why. So this was written by Martin Heller, owner of Martin Heller and Co. So probably has his own consulting company. Over at Tech Beacon is where I picked this one up. And he's talking about, 2001, we had the Agile Manifesto. You can go check it out. It's just, I forget, it's agilemanifesto.com or something like, or .org, I think. And they outline like the four different values and then 12 principles. And 12 principles for designing better software, blah, blah, blah. Most software development organizations have been thoroughly burned by failures of waterfall model projects and say they've adopted these principles. It's kind of interesting because I just watched a video with Kent Beck, and I think I mentioned this before, but Kent Beck was kind of noticing something that I see a lot of too, is that a lot of teams are just thinking that Agile is a bunch of little waterfalls. Like just if we do waterfall in a week, we're therefore Agile. That's not really right? It's still trying to. I think most businesses are still just trying to figure out how can we add process to this. How can we add a process, something that is measurable and quantifiable. And that's where I think a lot of businesses kind of misunderstand even the whole purpose of Agile is not a business philosophy, it's developer philosophy. It's a way of saying we as developers, this is what we value. And this is how we should build software. These are kind of some of the practices, or I should say principles, and the values that if we're going to be good developers, this is what we should adhere to. And then, of course, Scrum took that and decided, we can build a process off that, and we can market the hell out of that. Interesting. So it actually transitioned. That was weird. Okay, so, lip service is the rule, while true agile software development is the exception. I have to agree with that. I think Of many consulting situations I've kind of walked into, I'd say, and really, I should say even more so of the people who I've spoken with that are in the industry, this seems to be the general rule. Like almost every job application out there, every job um, post, right, is going to say, "Hey, we're an agile company, and you should know agile." Well, it's almost like it doesn't matter whether or not I know agile because I'm just going to do whatever you guys tell me to do anyway. That's kind of how it works. So, all right. So Martin goes on to say, "How can you tell if your organization is really walking the walk and not just talking the talk?" It all comes down to back to the Agile Manifesto using 8 of the 12 principles. And I actually like the 4 values most. I really like that because I like condensed, simple things that you can just kind of say, even if they're abstract and nebulous in a way, you can still kind of tell if you're aspiring to them. But sure, yeah, the 12 principles too. Let's look at how well organizations measure up, and you can compare it to what's happening in your own organization to see where you stand. So, 2 key principles are our highest priority is to satisfy the customer through early and continuous delivery of valuable software. And this is so important. And this a lot of different ideas kind of come from this, and I like the extreme programming side of how this works. Um, if you value working software that is continuously working on, ongoing working, you start to develop certain practices in your business that make sure that the system is always in a good state, right? And you need continuous delivery of value. We need to identify what it is that the client really wants and make sure that we are getting to it. And sometimes I think what happens is it's the squeaky wheel that gets the grease, right? So let's say a product owner has a meeting with a client, and the client says, "Well, these are some of the issues that we're encountering right now," and because the or the product owner just walked out of that meeting, it's like, okay, we've got to reprioritize everything and get on this bug right now or get on this thing right now. And everything that we've done up to this point is to prioritize and stuff is just kind of out the window. But then there's also this idea with Scrum that, once the product backlog is set as far as what we're going to be working on in the sprint, it can't be changed. It can't be adjusted. So, like, you have to figure out, are the new issues that are being described of actual value? Are they actually the most valuable thing? And sometimes you have to work with the client to kind of figure out, okay, what is the actual most valuable? Is it the thing that you're talking to me about right now, or is it some of the other things that we've already laid out? And then the deliver working software frequently from a couple of weeks to a couple of months with a preference to the shorter time scale, right? So continuously having working software, a working state. You have to start implementing practices within your company that ensure that at a moment's notice, you can release, right? If you know that your system is ready to go, it is in a state that is really good, and you consistently work to keep that state true, you're going to be implementing certain processes to make sure that happens. You're going to be working with tools like Git and GitHub or GitLab or whatever your Git central repository is. But you're going to be working with Git a lot, or some sort of version control management, or I'm sorry, source control management, to ensure that the code that you're writing is not only backed up, you can revert it, but it's split off, right? So while you're working on something, it doesn't necessarily affect this other thing that somebody else is working on, or that we have a good state for our application, and this thing that I'm working on, I don't have it quite working the way I want it to, but we're going to go ahead and release this code. It's just not going to be active. Right? That's where you have things like feature flags. Feature flags are fantastic for this because you can deploy software with the latest upgraded code that may not even be fully operational, but it can still be part of the release. It's just that the feature flag is turned off. So that thing doesn't work yet. It's being released. And then one of the cool things that you can do with that is you can kind of beta test just specific groups on that one particular thing. So you can say, if this person is in this particular location, then they will have access to this feature. Or, if they have a certain version of operating system, then they can try this feature. So you can kind of, work out based upon feature flags exactly what parts of the code are going to be operational for different individuals. And that way you're delivering working software just to the people that you want to deliver those pieces to, while keeping the whole system in a pretty good state. There's lots of these little techniques that you can do if you just do them. And I think a lot of businesses don't focus on that. They focus more on the process, the project management side of things, and keeping the customer happy. And we want the customer to be happy, but it's almost like the goal is to placate to the customer and never tell them no, rather than doing incremental improvement, incremental change, and implementing practices that the developer can do in order to ensure that there is incremental change and we don't just blow everything up because the client had a sudden request, right? And that's kind of really one of the problems. So easy, right, wrong, what could go wrong? How about this scenario? Your development is organized into 2-week sprints, which I prefer 1-week sprints, but okay, 2-week sprints. At the end of the 2 weeks, your product won't build. On investigation, you discover that some of the developers didn't understand the difference between git commit and git push, so they didn't update the common repository even after their code passed all the tests. Ugh. To make matters worse, some developers never bothered to git check out the project after the beginning of the sprint because they didn't want to merge other people's changes while they were in the flow. Yeah, like developers not working together with the tools like Git in order to make sure that their system is constantly in a working state. You've got to be using these systems, right? You've got to be using Git in order to make sure that your team can be agile. And it isn't always about the tools, right? I mean, it's always about working processes and individual interactions over tools, right? Tools and processes. So yeah, I mean, you've got to ensure that you are working together as a team, and you can leverage tools like Git in order to make sure that you are working as a team. And especially in this distributed world that we live in, where there's remote work all the time, we do video conferencing to kind of re-engage at the correct levels and make sure we're all on the same page. That's great. Like, you use those tools, but the bottom line is, underlying that, you've got to be maintaining the communication. There have been plenty of times where I've seen businesses that just, they have these tools but never use them to actually talk to one another. How are you using like Zoom or Google Meet or any of these, GoToMeeting or Citrix or any of those? How are you as a team utilizing that? Are you using it like you would in a normal office environment? Let me ask you, if you wanted to go talk to somebody, like right now, how would you reach out to them and talk to them? How would you get a hold of them? Chances are it might be some sort of Slack message or email or whatever messaging system you've got. And hopefully that person will reach back to you, right? But if you were in an office environment, you might just get up from your desk and walk over to their door or their cubicle and just see if they're in. That's the kind of experience that you like, because it's more personal, right? It's much more personal, and you can get a hold of that person right away. So why not leave your chat room open? Like, if you are online, if you are at your desk, why not leave your chat room open? Even if nobody's there. What if it's just you? Okay, somebody can still walk by and chat with you. Having that communication, having that ability to just kind of impromptu talk to each other, that's what's really important. And yes, you can leverage some of these tools like Slack and email and whatever messaging system you got. Maybe you're working with Microsoft Teams, which is really a cool product. I like Microsoft Teams. You guys should check it out sometime, especially if you're looking for an alternative to Zoom. Microsoft Teams is a really good product. Anyway, just finding ways of still sticking to those things, those principles of the values of Agile, where we are really emphasizing this interpersonal communication. are you actually doing that? Or are you kind of just comfortably living in your own little bubble away from anybody, and the only interaction you have with them is through some sort of Slack message when somebody has a question? That's really not emphasizing the individuals and interactions, right? That's not really emphasizing that communication. That's just emphasizing your own personal space. And I'm sure if you thought about it, you could come up with 100 different ways to better utilize and leverage the technology that we have at our disposal to facilitate a lot of these things, like communication, or how to do version, source control management. How are you working together on releasing? Another really great one that Extreme Programming pushes is doing paired programming. Are you actually working on code with other people? Like, are you in tandem working on the same thing? There's a lot of benefit to that. There's a lot of benefit of going through code and working on something together, because you have different levels of understanding, you have different levels of skill, you have different terminology, perhaps, and just kind of getting some alignment there of what the expectation might be between different individuals. You're going to get a better end product by having more brains working on the same thing. So anyway, okay. So are you really agile if you're not even leveraging Git properly? You have people that have code bases on their computer, but it doesn't get pushed up to the central repository. Nobody else can see it. You don't have a working project at the end of the sprint, which, by the way, in my opinion, the goal should be you should have a... So I like to have the feature that I am working on is constantly passing the tests. And I might have a feature flag that indicates whether or not the feature I'm working on, it's turned off for now. But while I'm working on it on my branch, I might temporarily turn that feature flag on so that I can continue working on it. But that way, I am consistently iterating over my feature and building it in my branch, and I got something that is working, but I'm constantly running automated tests and checking for things and making sure that each bit of line of code that I'm building is functionally working. Like, I could deploy this. I could theoretically deploy this. I just need to turn the feature flag off. And that way, my code should be ideally ready every minute, right? Every minute, it should be ready to go. But at the very least, by the end of each day, I should have a working code base that could potentially be deployed. It doesn't necessarily have all the features in it. It may not have all the functionality that we planned for in the sprint, but it is something that could be delivered and would be a viable working product. I want to have that so regularly that I never question it. I never have to question when my product is going to be ready for delivery. So, yeah, that's basically, I want to do that now. If you're working on 1 week or 2 week sprints and you don't have working software at the end of that sprint, that should be a pretty clear indication that you are not an agile company, okay? Because you are not behaving as if you should have working software at all times. That is not how you as a team are working. And that's where some new alignment needs to be happening. And I strongly encourage you, check out things like, Agile Manifesto and these practices, but also like Extreme Programming, the second edition book that Kent Beck put together is a really, really fantastic resource there too. Being ready for change. Welcome changing requirements even late in development, which is one of the reasons why I don't particularly like Scrum. It's because you're locked into just those things, and if something comes up and you realize, oh, we have to kind of change and divert directions because there was something that we discovered, you can't change. No, this is what we said was going to be in the sprint, and you're locked into it. Some teams are like that, not all of them, but if you're going to really be hardcore sprint Scrum, then that's what you got to do. Agile processes harness change for the customer's competitive advantage. About of 2 weeks before your Windows desktop product is due to ship, Microsoft issues a security patch that keeps a key function from working. You've already slipped your schedule twice, and management not only insists that you meet the current deadline, but won't authorize overtime for your team. You ship without modifying the feature and tell operations to roll back the Microsoft patch. Yeah, that's a pretty common thing. Like, some new thing happened and now we can't release Even though we're already, 2 sprints behind, we still can't release that feature because of X, Y, Z. And so we just continuously roll back and roll back and roll back. That's, again, feature flags would be really, okay, you could just simply disable the feature right now until we get this sorted out, but at least it gets released, right? Take a team approach. The manifesto goes on to state that business people and developers must work together daily throughout the project. Daily. How many of you guys, how many developers out there can honestly say they have daily contact with the business people? Daily. Probably not, right? Most of us, I think we get our list of bugs or, items out of the backlog that we just kind of work through. And maybe the only person that we talk to is the product owner, right? Or project manager. That's the only person we talk to on a regular basis, other than our co-developers, right? Our fellow developers. But we just get this image of, put your hoodie over your head and just type away. That's kind of the image that a lot of people have of what it means to be a developer. And that's really not how we are supposed to be behaving. That, according to Agile, that's not how we behave, right? We have to have that interaction, not just between the fellow developers, but also the business people. Okay, like what are their expectations of what this product is going to deliver? So that should be a regular thing. Now, quite honestly, and I think most of us realize this, one of the biggest reasons why that doesn't happen is not necessarily on the developer's end. It's the business people that don't really keep their schedules open or have that line of communication with the developers. Or there's some sort of barrier there. This is, again, one of the reasons I really don't like a product owner role, is because it kind of presents this dividing line between the developers who are implementing the thing and the people who want the thing. And there can be, you're playing telephone through somebody that is, trying to articulate both sides of this. And that can really kind of fuzzy things. And I think that's kind of where a lot of agile, quote unquote, agile gets mixed up too, is you're not really getting regular communication between the business people and the developers. And again, a lot of that is because the business people do not avail themselves to the developers. They think, I have this requirement, write it off, send off a ticket, and development team is going to do it. And then once it comes back to me, it better be exactly how I envisioned it. Because if it's not exactly how I envisioned it, then we're going to question that whole department. What are they even doing, those fools? Right? That's kind of what happens. I have one person watching. I lost all the people that were watching. I have one person. Nobody cares. Okay, let's continue on. There's no case. Okay, so the most efficient and effective method of conveying information to and within a development team is face-to-face conversation, right? Face-to-face conversation. So you should be trying to aim for the goal of a face-to-face talk with whoever it is you need to talk with. And especially when we're in this virtual environment, right, where we have everybody's remote and distributed, how do you facilitate face-to-face? The closest you can get is video conferencing, right? That's Zoom or GoToMeeting or, Citrix or Google Meet or Microsoft Teams, whatever that is. You should be doing it regularly, all the time. Like almost all of your interaction, you really want to try to have it in person, as close to in person as you possibly can. How you do that is entirely up to you. Then there's a case of business sponsor customer of a project who is in New York City and has marketing meetings for roughly 6 hours a day, including a mandatory end-of-day meeting each day with the CEO. Meanwhile, the developers are in Hawaii. The customer emails the development lead every 2 weeks, complaining that the software is buggy and late, but the customer is almost never available for live feedback over WebEx and has never come to Hawaii. That's no way to troubleshoot your problems. That's right. There needs to be something about that communication between that person in New York City and people in Hawaii that creates a more regular interaction and kind of live interaction, right? The face-to-face meetings. Another principle says that Agile process promotes sustainable development. The sponsored developers and users should be able to maintain a constant pace indefinitely. So this is another one. Go. Do you go fast or do you go steady? I think that you need to go steady. If you go fast, you end up going slow, right? You go fast to go slow. That's what ends up happening. You end up creating more problems for yourself in the long run because you're not doing things the right way. And I think we've all encountered this, right? We write some bit of code, and then 2 years later, we encounter that same bit of code, and we have no idea why it's there, how it's supposed to work. We spend a bunch of time trying to kind of tease this thing out and re-understand what it was that we were writing. And sometimes we're amazed that we were the idiots that we were back when we wrote that or whatnot. Um, Instead, you need to have a constant release. And the only way to do that is to target having value being delivered in a very steady way. Every day, is your system ready for release? If you can say yes to that question, then you're going to have a steady cadence of releases. You're going to have a steady release of new features because you're always working from yesterday's perfectly good state. So, the worst you can lose is 1 day's worth of work, right? Like that's the worst that you can have is you lose 1 day's worth of work if you are planning on at the end of every single day, I have working software. It may not have all of the features implemented, but it is working. It doesn't fail, okay? And I don't run into the problems that typically are associated with failures. So how do you get that? Again, every day you have to have this focus, this driven focus that by the end of the day, I need to make sure my code is working. It may not have all of the implementation that I need, but what I have written is functional. It works. Okay, that way the next day you come back and you are starting from a good place again. If you are not doing that and you're trying to take the entire 2 weeks of a sprint in order to develop a feature, but you have nothing but it's broken the entire time and you hope to rush at the very end to get it working, you're going to fail, right? There's going to be too many times where you fail and you're not going to be able to demonstrate or even ask questions or integrate the piece that you're working on with what other people are working on. And that's going to be what's going to really slow you down because you're trying to go so fast. You're not thinking about steady. You're not thinking about the regular consistency of working software. Okay. So constant, that is, unless the project has slipped an entire month and management has declared a death march. If the new shipping deadline isn't met, the company risks losing its customers, so the development team is expected to work 12 hours a day, 6 days a week to get the product out the door. Yeah, these are terrible things to do. This is terrible management is when they come in and just say, you're going to work on this until it's done. We have a difficult enough time really estimating how long it's going to take to do anything in the first place. How can you tell us that all of this is going to be complete by this particular time and take as much time as you need in order to get it done? That's just not the right way. It needs to be, again, consistency of it's all based upon these dang deadlines, right? If software development didn't have deadlines, the world would be a perfect place, right? Uh, no one would ever have problems with their software if there were never any deadlines. I should think of a really good way to summarize that in a quote and release that and get, buku royalty bucks for having that quote. But yeah, I mean, if the world didn't have deadlines, software would be perfect. Okay. Recognize real success. You might take to heart the idea that the working software is the primary measure of progress, or that simplicity, the art of maximizing the amount of work not done, is essential. But what if your manager uses a different measure? Suppose he does your quarterly performance reviews based on the number of lines of code you've written. Oh, that annoys the hell out of me. Kent Beck was talking about one of the reasons why he was no longer works for Facebook is because they weren't transitioning their business plans according to the popularity of the feature, and so there's kind of this extract where you're just trying to keep this idea running and figure out ways of optimizing that feature, little tiny increments, but Facebook doesn't really have a mechanism that says, you did good by telling us no. You did good by not implementing that thing. It turns out that if we had done that, then there would have been some serious drastic consequences. Like, there's no mechanism that they have that says you made a wise decision by not implementing something. And that was kind of one of the key things that he really found frustrating about Facebook, because they weren't re-strategizing according to that. And I think we kind of see that here again is, what is your measure of success? Are you making the code better in some sort of way? Or is it just the amount of code you're writing? The total amount of code that you write is XYZ amount, and because it's not up to what Richard produces on a weekly basis, we're giving you a strike. That's a terrible way to manage a company, and that's what a lot of businesses are doing. But that's not agile, right? And that's not really developer centric or product centric or release centric or any of the things that are really going to make you as a developer want to continue working for that company. So yeah, that's basically what Martin puts together here in this article. It's a pretty good one. I'll probably post the link in the description. But I would love to hear what you guys have to say. What are your kind of experiences working in so-called agile environments? I think it's frustrating that so many companies say that they're agile, and they put it on their job postings, but you never really truly know if they are agile. And maybe one of these videos I should do on what are the kinds of questions you should ask in an interview in order to find out if a company is truly agile. That might be a really good topic to do, because I think that's kind of one of those things that we would really like to know. And, you have to make a judgment call. Is it worth it to you to work for a company that says they're agile but not? In my opinion, no. And the type of methodology that they implement for agile, I don't know that I would ever want to work for a Scrum company again. I don't know that I would ever want to. I mean, there are certain elements of Scrum that are okay, and I do like, but I can't say that it's something that I would fully embrace as saying, oh yes, that makes them agile, and therefore I want to work for them. I don't know. I don't know that I'm at that state anymore in my career. I think I prefer much more of the XP principles than the Scrum stuff. So anyway, that's where I fall on it. Let me know what you guys think. What have you guys encountered out there in the wild? Have you worked for a company that said that they were agile and not? Or have you worked for a company that said that they were agile and actually were? All right, what were some of the business practices that they did? I'd really love to hear your guys' feedback. So just checking out the chat. Looks like nobody had anything to say. That's okay. I don't care. That's fine. You guys don't have to talk to me, I guess. Anyway, I hope you guys found this video enjoyable. I like putting these things together for you guys, impromptu little chats, and hopefully you guys found it interesting, and we'll catch you up on the next one. Thanks so much for joining me.